This is breaking news.
MTA officials are holding a news conference on how the transit system will adjust to phase 1 of New York City's reopening, which is set to begin Monday. Let's listen in.
Here this afternoon to announce our 13-point plan for a safe return as New York City begins reopening under Governor Cuomo's New York Forward plan. We've been planning our strategy for weeks and months. Our guiding principle throughout has been safety. Safety of our customers and safety of our employees. And the safety of our customers and employees will continue to be at the core of every action we take as we reopen. The MTA has always been the circulatory system of downstate New York. We connect pre-pandemic 15 million residents across New York City, Long Island, Westchester, and Connecticut with jobs, school, and cultural opportunities. Before COVID-19, ridership was steadily increasing, and we were well positioned for future gains in ridership. On average, between New York City Transit, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad, we were carrying approximately 8.3 million customers a day. In tandem with our improving operating experience, subway and railroad ridership increased in 2019, reaching 1.7 billion trips on the subway, 91.1 million trips on the Long Island Railroad, the highest number since 1949, and 86.6 million on Metro North, an all-time record. All of that changed with the advent of the pandemic. We're glad our customers heeded the governor's New York on pause order, but it meant that our ridership dropped precipitously. It fell to never-seen-before declines of more than 90% system-wide compared to pre-pandemic periods. Make no mistake, no transportation official likes to say this, but during this unprecedented event, lower ridership has been a good thing. As we look forward towards reopening, we've been closely analyzing ridership trends in line with the governor's phased reopening strategy. The MTA recognizes that restoring confidence in the system will be the linchpin of our efforts. As ridership has dropped, we've done everything we can to protect employees and essential customers, acting aggressively and adapting in real time to protect their health. This has been our guiding principle since day one. On March 3rd, we immediately implemented enhanced cleaning and disinfecting procedures, disinfecting stations once daily and the entire service fleet once every 72 hours. On March 11th, we further stepped up disinfecting efforts, increasing station disinfections to twice daily. On March 20th, we announced rear door boarding with our union partners to help protect our bus operators. On March 23rd, we eliminated most cash transactions to limit physical contact between our customers and employees. A day later, on March 24th, we instituted MTA Essential Service Plan that reduced service to encourage most of our ridership to stay home and adhere to the governor's New York on pause order, while continuing to provide needed transportation to essential workers like doctors, nurses, pharmacists, grocers, transit workers, and food delivery workers. On March 24th, we launched the nation-leading Mta Temperature Brigade. On April 14th, we announced the first-of-its-kind COVID-19 family benefits agreement that provides $500,000 and continued health benefits to the families of the more than 131 MTA workers who have tragically lost their lives to the virus. On April 16th, Governor Cuomo issued an executive order requiring all New Yorkers to wear a face covering on public transit. That executive order has the force of state law. On April 30th, we announced the closure of subways from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. to undertake the largest cleaning and disinfecting program in our history. That's the first scheduled nighttime closures in the 116-year history of the subways. On May 19th, the MTA launched the first ever ultraviolet UVC light pilot program. We partnered with Dr. David Brenner, the director of Columbia University Center for Radiological Research. Dr. Brenner found for the first time that UV light efficiently kills the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19. To date, we've distributed 2.4 million masks and 4.8, nearly 5 million pairs of gloves to our employees, acting even before the CDC reversed course to recommend the use of masks and facial coverings in public. These efforts are crucial as we welcome customers back to the system. Since May 1st, we have already seen an increase in riders, with combined subway and bus ridership now at 1.5 million customers. We have estimated phased projections for subway and bus ridership for each of the state and region's 4 phases, which are listed on the screen. Phase 1, manufacturing, construction, and retail, including curbside pickup, which begins in New York City on Monday, June 8th, and then phases 2, 3, 4 delineated on that slide. I want to note that these are just projections. There's a high and low end range for each. Projections are projections, and actual ridership may be higher or lower. In phase 1, we are projecting that subway ridership is expected to hover at a 10 to 15% of pre-COVID ridership. We expect bus ridership to be about 30 to 40% of normal ridership. In phase 2, we project that ridership could return to 25 to 40% of normal ridership on subways and up to 50% on buses. In phase 3, we anticipate up to 50% of normal ridership on subways and on buses up to 60%. Our projections for phase 4 show we could be at 70% of pre-COVID ridership on subways and perhaps 80% on buses. Importantly, I'll note that Seoul, Berlin, and Tokyo, which represent similar-sized transit systems carrying millions of passengers a day, which are also unable to create social distance but require masks, and there have been no significant spike in COVID-19 cases in any of those cities. The MTA is reimagining operations with one core mission: doing everything possible to ensure the safety of all New Yorkers. That brings me to our 13-point plan for a safe return. Step 1 is increasing service to meet the rising demands that's expected to come with the start of phase 1 and allow for social distancing to the extent possible. Sarah Feinberg, Kathy Rinaldi, and Phil Eng will speak about that in a minute. Secondly, we will continue our unprecedented cleaning and disinfecting program. Third, face coverings and masks are mandatory at all times for all customers and employees. 4, we're enhancing safety and security by increasing the presence of NYPD, MTA police, and other personnel system-wide. 5th, our nation-leading employee safety initiatives will continue. The Temperature Brigade will continue testing workers for fevers. Rear door boarding will remain in place on buses at this time, and we've installed hundreds of plastic barriers at employee workplaces across the system. 6, we're exploring innovative cleaning suggestions with pilots already underway, testing the use of ultraviolet light, antimicrobials, and electrostatic applicators for disinfecting purposes. 7th, hand sanitizers will be made available. 8th, stations across the system will be equipped with floor markings, directional arrows, and new signage to help direct traffic and reduce face-to-face contact as much as possible. 9th, the MTA is staggering hours for our own employees and has asked the business community to do the same to stop the spread out to help spread out the morning rush and avoid overwhelming the system during the rush hour. I'm gratified to say that we spoke with the board of the Partnership for New York City today. We've spoken with the Chambers of Commerce. We're following up with large, intermediate, and small businesses, and the response to the staggering of days and hours has been quite positive. We will distribute 2 million masks provided to our customers, provided by the state and the city. 11th, contactless payments will be made easier with the accelerated rollout of the Omni system, set to be completed by the end of the year on subways and buses, with key pieces accelerated. 12th, we're prioritizing new partnerships and technology to help make our system safer. Our incubator with the Transit Innovation Partnership, which is part of the Partnership for New York City, is looking right now into creative solutions for issues like disinfecting and crowding. And 13, customers can make empowered choices about their commutes by using our data dashboard, which will provide real-time information and updates. This effort is a huge undertaking. That's why we've asked our federal partners for urgent help. And any next coronavirus relief package from the federal government must include significant additional funding for the MTA. We've asked for an additional $3.9 billion. We're calling on Congress to provide this additional $3.9 million on top of the money already received and to be received in the weeks ahead from the CARES Act to cover the COVID-related operating deficit in 2020. The midpoint of that deficit in 2020, according to McKinsey, is $7.8 billion. A total of $10.4 billion is needed to cover the projected deficits through 2021. As we have said, this pandemic is a national problem that requires a national solution. We need additional funding streams distributed not by the same old funding formulas, but based on needs stemming from this unprecedented health crisis. Strong and robust public transportation will be critical in the nation's business districts to revitalize the country's economy. That is no more true here, any place in the country, than it is here in New York. It would be slow and stunt our regional recovery and the national economy not to include a robust package to replace lost revenue for mass transit systems, especially for the MTA, in the next federal relief package. Anything less would be a disservice to the essential workers who have relied on mass transit during this crisis, as well as the heroes, moving heroes at the MTA who have done the same. We are grateful for the support of the New York congressional delegation on this issue. Members of both parties have stood firmly behind our request. I want to acknowledge first Senator Chuck Schumer for his leadership on the CARES Act, enacted into law, the HEROES Act, passed by Speaker Pelosi in the House, and the municipal liquidity facility decision by the Federal Reserve Bank earlier this week. We appreciate also the leadership of Speaker Pelosi on the HEROES bill, Chair Nita Lowey and Representatives Hakeem Jeffries and Congressman Espaillat on this issue, as well as the entire delegation. I'm hopeful that further action will be taken on this desperately needed federal funding this summer. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, New York City Transit Interim President Sarah Feinberg.
Thank you, Pat. So, for the week of starting Monday, June 8th, to coincide with the start of Phase 1 of the Governor's reopening plan for New York City, we are preparing to restore full service. It's clear mass transit will be critical during this process as hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers return to their offices. As part of our ongoing efforts to prevent crowding, to the degree possible, subways will return. We've increased service on many lines already, as many have noticed. Buses will return to regular weekday closed school service in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens, and buses will go to 75% service in Manhattan. Express bus service will be restored in every borough. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without the hard work and dedication of the 54,000 men and women who make up the New York City Transit workforce. Since the start of this pandemic, 9,000 heroic employees have now returned to work. I'm incredibly grateful for their service. They are the true heroes of this pandemic. As Pat mentioned, we've been working around the clock to ensure worker safety. To date, the MTA has now distributed more than 2.4 million masks and 4.8 million pairs of gloves. Our Temperature Brigade has evaluated more than 200,000 employees. Workspaces are being disinfected 24 hours a day. Plexiglass barriers have been installed at occupational facilities across New York City Transit, and buses have been outfitted with plastic sheeting to further separate operators from customers. All the while, we are executing the most aggressive cleaning program in our agency's history. We shut down the subway system overnight from 1 to 5 a.m. to assist with these efforts, which so far have led to all 472 subway stations being cleaned more than 71,000 times. Subway cars have now been cleaned over 220,000 times. Most of our subway cars that are in service are now cleaned 3, 4, 5, 6, and up to 7 times a day. And if you took the subway here today, you noticed how clean the system is. This has not been lost on our other customers. According to a recent survey, 70% of New Yorkers say the trains appear to be cleaner than ever before. This is a massive success, and once again, the credit goes to our amazing workforce who are in the system 24 hours a day making this happen. Our latest pilot of UVC technology is proof of our commitment to thinking outside the box. Ultraviolet light has been used effectively in hospital operating rooms, urgent care facilities, universities, and first responder locations. We're also working with the EPA on antimicrobial products, which have been applied to more than 12,000 cars to date, covering our entire fleet twice. And we're going beyond the products themselves to evaluate new methods as well, including electrostatic applicators. On several car classes, we've launched a 30-day pilot program to test innovative new air filters to examine whether they effectively kill microbes. The MTA has already reduced the replacement life cycle of existing air filters. As Pat mentioned, we've already seen ridership increase in the weeks leading up to phase 1. 1.5 million people are now using the system every single day, and that number has been clicking up regularly. That's why we're taking a multi-layered approach to reopening and to the safety of our riders. We want people to give themselves as much space as possible when they're on our system. Mask usage will be absolutely required. We're making hand sanitizer available and adding new signs, decals, and floor markings to stations so that riders have as much information as possible about where to stand and how to move throughout the system. We're also increasing the police presence in stations, but they can't be in all places at all times, and so we'll need the cooperation of our riders. During each phase of reopening, ridership will gradually return to the system. This phased approach will help reduce crowding to the extent possible. But it can't do everything, and as those of you who have been riding the system in recent weeks know, even at the height of the pandemic and the depths of ridership, there was some crowding conditions. We need New Yorkers who can stay home to stay home. Phase 1 is for essential workers and for phase 1 workers. Public transit needs to remain that way during the phased reopening of the city. Phase 1 workers include construction, manufacturing, and retail workers. We're also asking that New Yorkers adjust the time of day that they're traveling with us. During the pandemic, the morning and afternoon peak shifted from 8 a.m. to now 7 a.m., actually 6 a.m., and in the evening from 5 p.m. to now 3 and 4 p.m. If you can travel outside of peak hours after 9 a.m. and before 3 p.m., please do so. We've urged the business community during phase 1 to continue remote work, staggered hours, and create alternative schedules to help prevent crowding. As a reminder to our riders, when you're in the system, masks are absolutely mandatory at all times. To protect yourself and your fellow commuters, please wear them correctly. The MTA will be distributing masks to customers at the beginning of phase 1 to those who enter the system without their own mask. This is thanks to the city and the state, who have both contributed 1 million masks. Again, most riders are already wearing masks. We see a compliance rate between 85 and 92% already. But for those riders who enter the system and have forgotten their mask, we will have one available for you. We're also piloting PPE vending machines in stations in the coming weeks where riders will be able to purchase their own protective gear. Customers will also see new messaging and new signs in the stations and on buses and trains to remind them of our new policies. This one highlights proper technique for wearing a mask. Hand sanitizer dispensers will also be placed in stations across the system to encourage hygiene and cleanliness. We will have gallon dispensers and will be distributing mini bottles. Floor markings will be visible in all stations eventually over the coming weeks to help customers adhere to social distancing where possible, like in front of vending machines and booths. Platforms have also been outfitted with floor decals, directional arrows, and new signage on walls. Now a word about safety and security. The MTA continues to work closely with our partners in the NYPD and the MTA Police to implement a strategic and effective plan to protect New Yorkers. Officers will continue to patrol the system. The NYPD has an enforcement plan in place regarding masks and crowding. We've also been in communication with City Hall and have directed MTA PD not to arrest anyone or issue summons because of masks or crowding. In our opinion, police should be there to offer guidance and enforcement and direct our riders as appropriate. Platform controllers and other station personnel will also be on hand to assist with crowd control. Ultimately, we are all in this together. Everyone must do their part as we reopen. Please follow public health guidance. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, cough into your elbow, and stay home if you're sick. If a train or a bus looks crowded, walk down to the platform or walk to the next car. Those who are able might also consider walking or riding a bike to complete short trips or to go to the next station. And give yourself a time cushion for travel and be sure to plan your trip using my MTA app. We understand that some customers are finding buses more appealing during this time. To maximize service, we've called on the city to add an additional 60 miles of dedicated bus lanes and busways, an increase of nearly 42%. It's more important than ever that we transport customers as quickly and effectively as possible during this crisis. With city streets virtually empty in the last few months, we saw average bus speeds rise considerably and commute times drop dramatically. Now, with ridership steadily growing and car congestion returning, we must act to maintain these improvements for our growing essential customers. Despite the pandemic, the MTA is also on track to install Omni Readers at all subway stations and on all buses by the end of the year, with some installations being accelerated beyond the original schedule. All Manhattan SBS buses will be activated with Omni by next month, and more than half of all subway stations now have these readers. Providing the option for contactless payment system-wide will help give customers peace of mind and limit direct interactions. We're also launching a new data dashboard that will put information directly in the hands of riders so they can make the best decisions for themselves about how and when to travel with us. We will be providing daily ridership information so that people know the kind of ridership increases we're seeing and can plan accordingly. We will never stop looking for new ways to improve the safety of our system. That's why the MTA is working with the Transit Innovation Partnership to explore additional creative solutions. In our new incubator, we are developing and evaluating technology to clean cars and stations to augment crews, thermal scanning of large groups, and the use of crowding sensors and reservation systems. This builds on our previous successes with the Essential Connector app, the ultra-wideband pilot, and our work with Remix to reimagine our bus networks. The safety of our customers and employees has been our highest priority throughout this pandemic and will remain our North Star as we move into recovery. Now I'll turn it over to Kathy Rinaldi to take us through the Metro North reopening plan.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Catherine Rinaldi. I'm the president of Metro North Railroad. Everything we do is with safety in mind. That's true all the time, but even more so during this pandemic. Metro North is acting aggressively to protect the health of our customers and our employees and to restore confidence in the system while the state reopens. The Mid-Hudson region entered Phase 1 on Tuesday, May 26th. That week, Metro North increased service capacity during the AM and PM peak by 26%, adding 19 trains. We added 8 trains on the Harlem line, 4 trains on the Hudson line, and 7 trains on the New Haven line. Beginning Monday, June 15th, Metro North will further increase service to 61% of our normal weekday schedule. 50 trains in the AM peak will arrive at GCT, 68 trains in the PM peak will depart Grand Central Terminal, and there will be 11 reverse peak trains. This all marks a 115% increase in our peak hour capacity. We will position additional trains to add more service as necessary, and will continually keep an eye on ridership to add trains as might be warranted to ensure social distancing. Off-peak fares, will remain in effect. Our stations have been cleaned and disinfected 7,192 times, and all station touch points continue to be disinfected twice a day. That practice went into effect at the very beginning of the pandemic. All of the cars that are in passenger service are being disinfected daily. They have been cleaned and disinfected 11,606 times since May. We are exploring innovative cleaning solutions to make our system safer, which includes tracking the progress of the UVC pilot in New York City Transit. Metro North employees are heroes. We are doing everything possible to protect them. We have provided sufficient and sustained PPE since the pandemic began. We've distributed 220,000 masks, 585,000 pairs of gloves, 7,000 hand sanitizer bottles, 2,000 Tyvek suits, and 1,700 face shields. For cleaning, we've used 4,500 gallons of BioWest disinfectant, 25,000 cans of Lysol and Claire disinfectant, and 14,000 canisters of disinfectant wipes. We've established mandatory temperature testing stations at Grand Central, as well as some outlying locations: Croton, Harmon, New Haven, Springdale, and North White Plains. We have a mandatory temperature testing taking place prior to trainings and rules classes, and we're in the process of distributing digital thermometers to all employees who will be required to take their temperatures before coming to work. We will continue not to accept cash on board, and we are continuing to disinfect all of our employee facilities all around Metro North territory around the clock. For our riders, if you are riding with us, please do the right thing and wear a mask. It's now required, and it's the least that you can do to protect your fellow commuters and protect yourself. In addition, we are enhancing safety and security. MTA police officers will be deployed strategically throughout the system. We're also deploying 75 station ambassadors across 30 of our stations on platforms and terminals to be able to monitor ridership, assist with loading, remind customers about social distancing, and give customers information about our service. Station buildings will remain closed at 15 locations for the time being. In addition, we're going to be installing touchless hand sanitizer dispensers at all New York State locations, all New York State stations. We will have dispensers at all New York City stations and other major stations by next week. In addition, we've installed floor markers in key locations where queuing is likely, including at ticket vending machines and ticket offices. We're in the process of piloting decals on platforms at Fordham, Pelham, Scarsdale, and Tarrytown in the coming weeks. These decals are supposed to adhere to rugged concrete and stand up to the elements. If this pilot is successful, the decals will be placed on platforms in order to remind our customers to maintain social distance and to wear a mask. Contactless payments are easier and safer for everyone. From the very beginning of this pandemic, both Long Island Railroad and Metro North have been encouraging our customers to the maximum extent possible to use e-tics. Metro North and the Long Island will be launching a new marketing campaign aimed at increasing the public's usage of the MTA e-tics app. Next, we'll hear from Phil Ang, the president of the Long Island Railroad.
Good afternoon, everyone. As everyone else has said, everything we do is with safety in mind, the safety of our customers and the safety of our employees. And that's true all the time before the pandemic, and even more so during this pandemic, when we've layered on unprecedented measures on top of safety related to train movement. Safety restores confidence. So as we entered phase one of Long Island's reopening in May 27th, to ensure that we were ready for phase one workers, we lengthened trains to increase capacity. To further support that, we also pre-positioned additional trains at strategic locations throughout the system, what we call protect trains. These trains were called into service on an as-needed basis, and if we observed demand for them. They total 120 cars or 20% additional capacity available. And the entire time we've been preparing for New York City's phase one reopening. So beginning this Monday, June 8th, the Long Island Railroad will further increase service to 90% of our normal weekday schedule. We will continue to have trains strategically pre-positioned to add service as necessary. And ticket offices at Penn, Jamaica, and Atlantic Terminal will reopen. The Penn ticket office will be open 24/7. Jamaica and Atlantic Terminal ticket offices will be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The Long Island Railroad Lost and Found will reopen, and off-peak fares will remain in effect during this time. We encourage all of our customers to check the MTA info website, as well as our apps, to look at the new schedules when planning their trips for the latest information. We've also had unprecedented cleaning. All station touch points continue to be disinfected twice daily. To date, 7,438 station cleanings have taken place since May. 27,359 train cars have been cleaned. And we're continuing as our partners, as our sister agencies are, exploring innovative cleaning solutions and methods to make our system safer. And thank you to our 7,500 incredible Long Island Railroad workers. They carried Long Island through this crisis. Their safety and peace of mind is paramount to successful service, and that's why providing sufficient and sustained PPE to them is vital. We've distributed over 330,000 masks and over 780,000 pairs of gloves, 2,300 plus face shields, and enacted a no cash on board policy in effect to protect the safety of them and our customers, and disinfecting occupational facilities around the clock. So while mass transit remains for essential workers and essential trips only, as my colleagues have said, if you're riding with us, you need to wear a face covering and wear it properly. Face coverings are required for all customers and our employees. And safety remains a key priority, and MTA PD is being deployed throughout the system with additional coverage on our trains and its strategic branches. I cannot say enough to thank them for their support. 85 station ambassadors at 30 locations along Nassau, Suffolk, Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan will be stationed across the system. Seated station waiting rooms will remain closed during this time, and 84 station buildings will also remain closed. But 27 stations will be staffed with roaming ambassadors to assist with rider information, tickets, social distancing monitoring, and support. And during this time, summer travel packages do remain suspended as we continue to run service for essential workers, plus those reporting to work under Phase 1 New York City. So in partnership with New York City Transit and Metro North, we're also piloting social distancing floor markers in key locations at ticket vending machines, ticket counters, and on platforms. Other decals will mark entrances for exits to control flow, and sanitizers in stations as well. Floor markings there. Well, in closing, as Kathy had mentioned, we're also working together on a marketing campaign to really publicize and support the use of e-ticks. It's the best way to purchase, and it's safe for everyone. So as I close, I just say thank you to the public, thank you to our labor partners, and thank you to the entire MTA workforce. They are truly heroes moving heroes.
All right, good. Questions? Andrew.
The complaint there could be upwards of 15% of people who are not wearing masks. So my question is, what are you as a rider supposed to do if you're on a subway car this Monday and there are people without masks on your subway car? Should you confront them?
Okay.
Please.
So I think I understood you. So first you started off with the numbers that we provided, which is we're seeing 85 to 92% compliance of mask usage. And we got those numbers by actually sending people down into the system, some of our traffic checkers and others, to watch what was happening in a bunch of different stations, and I'm really pleased with that number because it shows a really high degree of compliance, and I'm happy about it. So first of all, for anyone who shows up at a subway station this week and you've forgotten your mask, I don't know how you got to the subway station without noticing that, or it fell out of your pocket, or you've ripped it, or whatever, go to the station booth or go to one of our volunteers that'll be in the station and ask for a backup mask, and we'll be happy to take care of you. There'll also be vendors in the stations and vendors around the stations that will happily sell you a mask for, I am sure, a small amount of money. For those who are riding a train with someone who's not wearing a mask, don't confront your fellow passengers. Leave that to law enforcement personnel. Just put as much space as you can between yourself and the person who's not wearing a mask. But also, folks, we're seeing this in our everyday lives. As you walk down the street, as you wait as you wait in line at the grocery store, as you go about your lives, not every single person you run across has a mask. So put a little distance between yourself and that person. We urge everyone to wear a mask. It's absolutely required, but we don't need people to take on confrontation on their own. Okay, Dan.
Greg.
Sarah, I wanted to ask, earlier on a radio program, 1010 Wins, you said, if we see you entering the system and you don't have a mask on, we're going to either turn you around and send you home to go get your forgotten mask, or we're going to have a lot of extra masks in the booth so people can come and get an extra mask at the booth and be on their way. Who's the we that will be turning people away from entering the system? Is that going to be any kind of MTA transit worker staff, like booth agents and the like? And then as far as giving people a mask, what's the process so people don't wait in line at the booth? They get there and say, oh, we're out of masks.
So a couple questions there. First, look, this is not a whole lot different than what's happening right now. So right now, even prior to reopening, if you walk into a subway station and you're not wearing a mask, you may be asked by a member of the MTA police or the NYPD or some other person on MTA staff to exit the system until you have a mask, or to put on your face covering, or to put on your mask properly. So those kinds of interactions are happening already, and I expect them to continue to happen next week as well and going forward. Look, our employees, the workforce at New York City Transit has plenty to do. We do not need to be enforcing the law on top of everything else. That doesn't mean that there won't be someone in a station booth or a platform controller who doesn't notice that you're not wearing a mask and ask you to put one on. But generally, we leave the enforcement of our rules and regulations, just like we always have, to law enforcement.
It's a capacity question. Do you have a number how many riders should be on the different buses or the different model train cars? And moving forward, is that something that would be enforced? Could we see stations actually closed to handle that?
You want me to take it? Well, first of all, the capacity numbers vary from, depending on the kind of bus, depending on the subway car. So, look, here's the reality. Even in the worst moment of the pandemic, when we were truly only moving essential workers, and ridership was as low as we could ever imagine it, probably about 8%, there were still moments, and I know because I was on these trains and I was in the system, there were moments when you would not be able to social distance on the subway system. And that is because we're the New York City subway station, and there are hundreds of thousands of people in our system, even on the day when you have the lowest ridership, and generally there are millions of people using our system. So, to come up with a capacity number doesn't, in our opinion, is not the right approach here. What our approach is to do everything we possibly can do to keep the system safe, do everything we can possibly do to make sure that riders have the tools they need to keep themselves safe and to make the right decisions, right? How crowded was it yesterday? How crowded is it today? What's my route? Is this platform crowded? Should I move to a different part of the platform? Should I go into this car? Make sure that people have all the information they can, and then get people safely from one stop to the next.
Hey guys, I got two questions. One is the mayor's continued to say that he's rolling his bus lane plan out soon. There's no specifics really. Can you shed any light on the talks that the MTA has been having with the DOT around that? And really, how quickly do you need those bus lanes rolled out? And the second is, in your letter to the mayor recently, you asked for more NYPD officers to be deployed to the subway system because of the anguish and chaos the city has experienced over the last week. But given that that anguish and chaos is related to people who are saying they're over-policed, how does adding more NYPD to the subway make sense?
Good, sir.
So on the bus issue, we've not heard back from the mayor's office on the letter requesting 60 additional miles of bus lanes. Obviously conversations happen between City Hall and MTA all the time, and there have been lots of conversations about additional bus lanes for weeks, if not months, and so we would just urge the mayor to move as quickly as possible, and we're certainly ready to move if they are. On the policing thing, I'm not sure I totally caught everything that you said, but generally you were referring to, I think what we've said, which is that in order to enforce mask usage, that's something that we count on the MTA police and the NYPD for. And in the back and forth between MTA and City Hall as enforcement of social distancing came up, something that we thought was very important for everyone to understand was that MTA, first of all, we do not believe that it's necessarily possible to get 6 feet of social distance in the New York City transit system. And second of all, if someone wants that enforced, that's going to land on NYPD and police and law enforcement, not on train operators and bus operators.
Anybody else who hasn't asked a question?
Two quick questions. One is the rear door boarding on buses. Are you basically not going to collect fares on buses indefinitely? And as a second question, I saw that your phase 4 projection, Pat, was that only 70% of subway ridership would be back at phase 4, essentially at the end of the pandemic. How catastrophic is that for your finances?
Look, on the second question, I would say the following, that getting to 70 or 80% ridership at the beginning or the middle of phase 4 would be a dramatic increase in ridership and would address significantly the precipitous drop in revenue. I think, frankly, Andrew, and we don't know their projections, right? I think that that is a doable number and not inconsistent with the growth that other transit agencies around the country have experienced. And I'll leave the rear door boarding question to you, Sarah.
So rear door boarding will continue into at least phase 1. Phase 2, we have no plans to remove it at this point. Sorry, is it a fair question?
And they don't have to pay indefinitely.
So look, I would love it if I would love for folks to be paying their fare. No one would like that more than the MTA. We are actively working on solutions, but at least at the beginning of this, we understand that we need to make sure that riders feel safe and that operators feel safe. But I feel like we'll have a solution quickly.
Dan.
Question one each for Sarah and Pat. Pat, you discussed earlier other cities, Seoul, the use of masks. Is there anything, I know you have this study that is being done about best practices. Can you just say what you've learned so far, at least, about mask usage in other transit systems around the world and why that's so important? And for Sarah, a question on the capacity of running trains. Do you have the capacity, the train cars, the crews, the money to run more service in the off-peaks so that if businesses are staggering hours, those commuters will have just as many trains to choose from so they're not crowded into fewer trains than they would have at the rush hour?
All right, so let me, Dan, respond to your first question. Look, other cities in, other transit agencies in cities in Asia and Europe went into the pandemic before New York, before the United States did, and came out. We've been very focused on tracking their experience both directly and through the trade associations, APTA in the United States or APTA in North America and UITP on an international basis to make sure we have the benefit of their experience. One of the things we've concluded from that review is what the position that Sarah and I have been consistent, and Phil and Kathy as well from the beginning, is that social distance is not possible on a transit system like the MTA's, which carries literally millions of people a day in quote normal close quote times, and we hope to get to that return to normalcy in the very short term. But I will say that one of the common features in every city and every transit agency is wearing masks. And I'd ask the media to focus on the sign up there, the service advisory sign, which says that Metro North employees and customers traveling on Metro North are required to wear face masks or covering. It would be an incredible public service were you to put that on and to make that part of your stories, because the single most important thing, and we're describing a multi-level, multi-dimensional plan, but the single most important thing is that all our employees, and I believe that compliance is, as I've been able to see, is 100%, and all of our customers wear masks every moment they're on public transit. It will protect them, it will protect their fellow commuters and employees. And I'll turn to Sarah for the second one.
So the question on off-peak. So Dan, we'll be watching. So first of all, we'll be watching very carefully to see when riders are entering the system, how they're using the system, because we always want to be able to adjust as needed. So right now, we expect that the majority of our riders in the morning will be riding between 5 and 8 in the morning, and that the afternoon so-called rush will be 3 to 5-ish. That's what we've been seeing. That's what we've been seeing in the past several weeks. But we're going to monitor this closely and make sure we're ready to adjust.
All right, great. And then the last question will come from the New York Knickerbockers.
It's Nate Robinson today. Sarah, so just to go back to this policing issue, has the MTA looked into any kind of ways that are non-policing options to get people to wear masks, community ambassadors, trusted volunteers who can kind of work with people on the system so that they aren't being confronted with police being asked to wear masks?
Yeah, so great question. To be clear, I don't think anyone up here or at the MTA wants to use law enforcement to do anything other than what they should be doing. So what you'll see in this system in the coming weeks will be MTA, some volunteers, some MTA personnel who are going to be out in the system offering people a mask if they haven't brought one. So certainly that's something that we're looking closely at.
And the final question, Andrew Sif.
The mayor has said that you could do better with social distancing on trains by blacking out every other seat or even more than that. And he said that he's waiting to hear more from the MTA on how you can do social distancing in the subway. What's your response to that?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you're going to reopen and you're going to tell people to come back to work, you have to provide transportation for them, right? And that's our job. So folks above our pay grade decide whether or not the economy and the city are going to reopen and whether workers are going to come back to work. And then our obligation is to move those folks. So we start with sort of some obvious established numbers. We only have so many trains. We only have so many seats. We only have so many lines and so many tracks, right? And so if you accommodate this demand for social distance, that means you can only serve a small percentage of your riders, which means that we're not able to keep up our end of the deal, right? And so our compact with riders is for $275. We pick you up and we take you from where you are to where you need to go, and we do it safely and we do it efficiently. And we don't do it based on where you live, and we don't do it based on what stop you got on, whether you got on at the second stop or the fifth stop. And we don't do it based on whether, we've decided to bypass a station because we don't want to let anybody else on. Our compact is you pay $275, we move you safely and efficiently. And so that's what we're going to be running up against. And so, look, we're all under a lot of pressure. This is an unprecedented crisis. I take the mayor's advice very seriously and his guidance very seriously. But to suggest that the New York City subway system, as ridership is growing, can allow for social distancing, I think suggests an unfamiliarity with the system or a lack of sincerity.
Good. Thank you all.